Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Jane the Virgin, Season 1, Episode 2, Chapter 2. In this episode, Petra has taken matters into her own hands, and I gotta admit, there's a part of me that can't help but root for this bitch. I don't love that. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you so much to Claire for commissioning this episode. And thank you, Claire, for being flexible and allowing me to move the episode up so that I could do some holiday stuff later this week. Weird choices on my part for this month. I took Tuesdays off instead of a Thursday before Christmas. Why would I don't know what I was thinking. And I moved it up yesterday, and like about 2 hours after moving it up, started to feel sick. So now I have a cold, and I'm just like, nothing has worked out for me very well. But it's not too bad, so I'm here, and I really, really enjoyed watching this episode, so I'm glad to get to talk about it. But I just really am so blown away at how many twists this show has managed to pack in this quickly. How many little moments had me going, I swear to God, finding out that his sister's lover is her stepmother. That got a full-on out loud gasp. True moment of just, oh my God. And it took me a moment to really comprehend the fact that she knows that's her stepmother already. Like, it for me, for a moment, I was watching it going, oh my God, what must it be like to realize that the woman that you just hooked up with is your stepmother? And then I was like, no, bitch, she fucking knew that already. Of course she knew, and she went ahead with it anyway, which makes it so much more of a boneheaded decision. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself here because there is a lot to get through here. So this episode starts with an amazing scene of Jane's quinceañera. And her mother is performing. It's all about like the quinceañera and how carefully Jane had planned it out. And eventually her mother came in and decided to perform Milkshake and kind of ruin the day. Now, thankfully, as much as it's an incredibly embarrassing situation, Jane isn't exactly holding this against her mother too much. It's more like she just sort of tries to recover the day after this like extremely awkward moment. And even in the present, when she references it, she is assuming that her mother is like going to be embarrassed by it and tells her not to worry about it. Just doing this thing that I think a lot of young girls, how to put this? Those of us born to mothers who were young when they had us have a very different experience of being mothered, I think, than those who were born to older parents. And there was a tweet I saw the other day, and they were quoting somebody saying to them, wow, thank you so much. You're such a good listener. And they respond with, thanks, I've been my mother's therapist since I was old enough to talk. And I was like, oh man. And I'm not meaning to throw my mother under the bus or anything here, because my mother, I had a good mom. I got very lucky with my mom. But when you are that young, my mom had me when she was, I think, almost 19. there is a weird disconnect that happens in that authority figure sort of position that they're supposed to take in your life. And there are a lot of times with the kid, a sense that their parent never really got a chance to fully grow up before they were put in the position of being a parent. So when I have encountered other people who know me first and then meet my mother, I have had it said to me more than once that I seem like her mother, that I'm always managing her emotions and looking out for how she's going to react to stuff. And that is a very real thing that you fall into if you had a particular kind of relationship with your mom. And that's not to say that this is the only situation where that can happen. But I just wanted to mention noticing more than once that Jane does that. I do really appreciate getting to see what really was going on in that moment, and finding out that Shamara is like a very good mom in as much as she was capable of being a mom with so little time to prepare and so little life experience and so few resources available to her. So when I say this, I'm not trying to say Shamara is a bad mom or a bad person or selfish or anything like that. But when you are a kid that is like very conscious of the fact that you came along rather early and disrupted someone's life, there is no way, if you are a particularly sensitive type like I am and like I believe Jane is, to not feel like part of you has been a burden. And even if you know that your parent doesn't see you that way, because I believe, and Jane believes, my mom loves me, and I know she does. I never felt like my mom wished I had never been born. That was never even a question. I knew that she loved me. But nevertheless, I always kind of felt like I had to earn my place because I took up space right away that hadn't been intended for me initially. Does that make sense? So I get that from Jane here and there, and I'm going to keep an eye out for it more because I'm curious how they're going to cope with it. But I do really like Shamara, and I love my mom. I'm not trying to say that this is something that's like anyone's fault particularly. It's just a sort of, I just wonder what it used to be like when people had kids even younger, you know? Raising children was a very different thing, of course. So, but anyway, this moment where she sings Milkshake, I love how like completely she goes into it, and Jane immediately rescues the situation with Who Wants Cake. So as they start talking, because this opens with a meeting where she's with her mom, her grandmother, and Michael. She doesn't want to talk about the baby as if it is a baby. She wants to call it a milkshake. And really, there's a part of me that gets what's happening here. She says, I want to go ahead and live my life. I don't want anything to change. I want this event to not completely take over and derail anything. I'm in college. I have a good job. I'm engaged to a great guy. There are some issues that I'm going to have to deal with, but I will handle it, and nothing else has changed, okay? And this is when her grandmother chimes in and says that you should keep the baby. And she immediately throws her hands up. So Michael here, this is an interesting thing, because Michael, I love that he starts off with this meeting. Yeah, I'll be here to contribute the opinion from a male point of view. And she's just like, yeah, no, don't lead with that. I was like, good call, girl. Yes. Cut him off on that. Nobody wants that. But here he asks what she said. And when he finds out that she's recommending keeping it, you can see him grow a little bit panicked. And as we find out later, he is willing to keep some things from Jane in order to get what he wants in the end. And I don't really know how to feel about this because, you know, it's obvious he doesn't want to keep the kid. And really, I can't be mad at him for that. I really can't. It's deeply understandable. But there is just a real sense of, throughout this episode, Jane doing her best to start things on the foot with him, where everything is out on the table. And he is not doing that with her. And that says something. So it ends, the scene ends, and we go over to Petra, and she is talking to Raphael about making the marriage work. And he's like, I know what you're doing and that you are trying to wait out the prenup so that you can make some money off of me. How are we going to work through that? And she gives him a look that really says, I do not know how to respond. They get interrupted by, what's his face? His friend showing up and knocking on the door. I do not, like, if he hadn't shown up at that exact moment, what would she have said? You know what I'm saying? So anyway, Zaz comes in, and I just keep wondering, what is it like to be a person fucking the man's wife in front of that man and his wife at the same time? Like, I have known people who were cheating and had their lover in the room with them along with their spouse and just acted normal, and the spouse didn't know. I have never, and I could never, genuinely, I don't know what you're thinking and how you pull it off. The number of layers of falseness that have to be in place to pull that off is mind-boggling to me. But anyway, he comes in and asks, how are you holding up? And it's a whole moment of like, it feels like Petra gives him a warning look, like shit isn't going well. And he's trying to keep her calm, because that seems to be the dynamic most of the time, is that Petra is on the edge of freaking out and Zaz is reminding her that she has to play it cool. But I couldn't quite tell if that was what was going on there. And when we cut back to the meeting, when Jane says, so I'm just going to go, next thing I'm going to go to work and go back to my life and I'm going to get the sonogram, Shamara interrupts and is like, no, the next thing you're going to do is sue the freaking doctor. So then we go to Louisa, who is sitting there at her desk freaking out. She is continuing to practice even though she knows that shit's on the line. And her ex-lover, Rose, who is just so beautiful it's gross, comes in and is checking on her, asking if she's drinking again. And, oh, Claire's here. Yay! Hi, Claire. I'm so glad you could come. So she asks Louisa, have you been drinking? And later on, there's a moment, you guys, where Louisa has a bottle of vodka sitting on the table and she's just staring at it. I think it's vodka. And I was like, bitch, what are you doing? Like, I really thought she was just doing that thing where she fights with herself about whether she should drink. Because honestly, why have the bottle if you're not considering it? You know, like, and what she says is, every time I don't drink, I feel good about myself and everything else is going so wrong that I need something to feel good about. So I'm just reminding myself that I haven't had a drink. And while a big part of me was like, that's actually kind of genius, and I sort of love that for you, another part of me was like, but testing yourself this way just feels like such a minefield, you know? Like, that's like me just sitting outside a Cinnabon and not eating any Cinnabons. Why poke the bear? Why do that to yourself? I don't know, kiddo. Feels kind of masochistic. But anyway, she says, I haven't received any official notifications that my license is suspended, so I just thought maybe I wouldn't worry about it. But then she gets the email, and yeah, there is the suspension. Ta-da! So what we find out a little bit later is that the way that she got insured to practice was by getting collateral from her brother's business to co-sign for that insurance, basically because she had already had issues due to her drinking, I'm assuming. Oh God, I'm just realizing so many things that could potentially have also contributed because the show keeps like throwing curveballs out and being like, oh, guess what? This thing happened. I have to imagine that whatever she did before that caused her to be on like probation, that must be quite a story. But she needed somebody because the insurance wouldn't like back her if she didn't have somebody in addition to co-sign with her. So if she gets sued, her brother's like property, this hotel, could potentially be in the crosshairs as well. So he has a real vested interest in not getting her sued, but later on kind of admits that she deserves to be sued, even though it's going to hurt him. And he admits this to Jane without letting her know he's going to be hurt by it, which I do really appreciate and think that's a sign that he's a good guy because he's not trying to shield himself too much. But it is after he had tried to shield himself and say, don't sue, just tell us how much money you want and we'll give it to you, basically, which was not the approach. And Jane was right to fucking side-eye him for that. So yeah, everything is just a lot more tangled up than it seems like at first glance, especially the fact that this was his sister. Apparently Jane still didn't know that, which I was surprised that hadn't come up yet. But the fact that it was his sister that inseminated her is news to her. And I'm just like, good God. So Jane is really like struggling here to try and keep her life as normal as possible. But the thing is, when you are, even if you're not going to keep the baby, the kinds of massive changes that your body is going to go through are at the very least life altering. Like, this is a major part of why people should have choices in whether they get pregnant or not, because it's not just about having a baby. Your entire person is going to be different. And there is the very real possibility of serious injury or death, which we all act like just doesn't happen anymore, but it's a big problem still, and especially in the United States, and especially with Black women in the United States. So, yeah. And look, I took on fostering these fucking puppies with the full anticipation that I would find them homes, they would be outside, it wouldn't disrupt our lives too much. Guess what, kiddos? My life is divided into two distinct periods now, before puppies and after puppies. And those are very different periods. And I didn't know any of that was going to happen. I didn't plan any of that. I didn't know. You don't know. Because let's be honest, if you did, you wouldn't do the thing a lot of the time. And that's not to say that if I knew how things would go, wouldn't have taken the puppies. I likely still would have, because how could I not? But I wouldn't have been as blithe about it. There's just some things that change your fucking life. That's just, it, So we go to the conversation where he comes up to her, tells her that Luisa is his sister, and then says, just give us like a number and we will figure out how much to pay you. And she is rightfully just kind of like, dude, are you for real? Like, what is it that he says here? Because I love the way, first she asks, what makes you think I'm after money? And he says, I just assumed because, and she says, because I'm a waitress. And he says, no, I know you're not just a waitress. And then she says, just a waitress? That's not what I meant. Look, you're in college. So if I wasn't in college, I would be just a waitress. Jane, I think you're taking this the wrong way. Yeah, maybe I am. Except this huge thing just happened. And then you're telling me that's your sister. And then you're offering me money. So, yeah. And there is something about the way that she says that and the look he gets on his face. It feels like he really gets it. You know what I mean? Like there are times where you're talking to somebody and you can see they can tell you're upset and they're still not really understanding why. But when she reframes it like that, you see him just stop dead and just be like, oh man, this is so tacky. I'm being really shitty. So I did appreciate that from him. And the next scene when she's talking to all of her friends about everything, she says something about how, but I think he's like a decent guy. And one of them is like, and she says, what? Just some things I have heard about him over the years. What kind of things? And then we see her Googling him. Sexyfelons.com. A mugshot. He is in this tank top that I can only describe as like Malibu Ken. We see him punching some guy out at a bar. We see him in a hot tub with a bunch of models, a couple of whom are topless. We've got him in like what looks to be a casino with his like hand in the camera, shirtless selfie that looks probably like he was naked and it's just been sort of, blurred out at the bottom. And all of this is leading me to ask, what the fuck with Petra's mother? We see her for the first time this episode, and she has burn marks all the way down one side of her face. And then when she leaves the room, she does so in a wheelchair. And we had only just seen her seated and we never saw her face earlier. And I didn't actually think about how weird that was at the time. It just, it didn't even enter my head to wonder. I was just like, maybe she's just supposed to be the sort of like voice whispering in Petra's ear. And she's sort of symbolic and not meant to be like her own real character. No, they were hiding a little bit of a thing going on here. And I say a little bit, it's a very big thing. And I'm wondering if he had something to do with this injury and if she is a victim of his past shitty behavior and Petra put herself in his way to try and get something out of him to make up for the ruin of whatever happened to her mother. Like, it may have something to do with his father and not with him, but who knows? Like, his father we meet for the first time in this episode as well. So there could be a lot more to this that we don't know. But anyway, she calls Michael panicking about Raphael and the fact that he is not a good person. And she really is like, she knows he doesn't want it, but she also knows that he is going to listen to and understand her. So she thinks. And she's like, I don't know. I feel like he's unfit. Did you see the things that he did? Did you click on the links? And he says, look, clearly this dude went through some life-changing stuff. He got cancer. He wants a kid. The dude from the Bora Bora thing wouldn't want a kid. And she sort of calms down and is like, you're right. And he's like, give this guy a chance. And I kept forgetting in this scene that he, again, has a vested interest in not keeping he doesn't want to keep the kid. So arguing her into giving this kid to Raphael is a little bit of selfishness on his part. And when I say it's selfishness, I am not trying to be judgy about it because, again, I don't blame him at all. I want to be very clear. What I blame him for is the thing later. That's a different thing. But at this point, I can't get mad at him for this. So then we have the scene where Zaz is talking to Raphael as they're watching Petra set up at the poolside for this party that they're hosting for his dad. And Zaz is trying to get Raphael back on Petra's side by talking about how hard she's trying, about how she's like going to impress his father and make him trust that Raphael can run things. She's doing this for you. To which Raphael replies, yeah, maybe. Or maybe she knows that if she gets my father on her side, it will be that much harder for me to leave her. And Zaz just says, wow, so you're pretty much done then, huh? And it's an interesting moment to know how much of a blow it is to Zaz to hear this. And he has to sort of just play it like, wow, man, sorry for you. But we know that it's him watching like, $100 million slip away. We get this amazing moment where Petra sees the ice sculpture that's shaped like Merlin when she wanted it to be a marlin, like the fish. I truly love that. It's such a stupid joke. I don't know why I found this so funny, but we cut right from there to the passions of Santos, and he's in a rowboat with a leopard in the prow of the boat. And he's talking about how sometimes he wishes he was a simple fisherman instead of the president of North Ecuadoras. I fucking love Ecuadoras. Like, it's giving Hallmark Christmas movie, like, Sokovia. You guys know what I'm talking about? In so many of these Christmas movies, they have to come up with a fake country and they have to like make it sound like a real thing just enough. So they like take pieces of country names and like put them together. And this killed me so bad. I love this so much. And why is there a fucking leopard? Like why? What possible purpose does this serve? And I love he turns to her and takes her hand and kisses it. And then we see the leopard just jump off the side of the boat and everybody begins to freak out. And I'm like, y'all just had a loose leopard on a fucking rowboat. And now you're surprised that he didn't stay in place. Like he was just loose. Where's your handler? Where's your animal stunt coordinator? What are you doing? Nobody has insurance on this fucking bit. Like what's going on? And so he is like hiding behind this rowboat, and I love Shamara comes in, walks right past everybody, does not give a fuck about the leopard. She is like, you know what you need to deal with is me. I am a much bigger problem for you than this fucking leopard. Now, I have got to talk about this dude. What is his actual name? Because I keep wanting to call him Santos. And I don't know if like if that's his, because how sometimes they will use actors' real names and things. He is really enjoyable. And I'm trying to sort of put my finger on what it is that I like about him. And I realized that his vibe is giving Joey Tribbiani. He is a vapid but good-hearted himbo type. He's very self-absorbed and he's very into his appearance and like feels that he is a gift to the world. but he does all of this without being like gross and self-centered about it. He wants to meet his daughter and genuinely seems to like mean it. He wants to know her, you know? And he does frame it as, I want to give her the pleasure of knowing me, which is really quite a way to say that. But there's no superciliousness when he says it. He says it with this genuine, like, artless sincerity, like a child. There's just something about him that feels like a kid, you know? Rogelio is his name. Thank you, Claire and Rowan. So I feel like it could have been really easy to make him like insufferable, but I'm finding myself enjoying him on screen. Every time he shows up, I'm kind of like, oh, here he is. You know, he's just a little bit of a weirdo, and I like it. So yeah, he argues with her and is like, I want to be a part of her life. I can't believe you kept this from me. And she's like, you told me to have an abortion. And he's like, come on, I was a fucking kid. And she's like, yeah, I know. And I was a kid. I told my mom it was some random guy and it's been years. And I know I was a screw up, but I've changed. And just all of this, he really seems to mean it, you know? And I feel like she gets the sense that he means it. And she says, all right, I'm going to tell her today. And he is super excited about it. It's adorable. And then he asks, what is she like? Which honestly, so many people wouldn't even really ask this question. Like, you would be surprised, I think. And her mom tells him that she's pregnant. And he's like, wait, what? Oh my God. And she has to get into this whole story. She doesn't tell him quite everything, but we cut to then Petra talking about how I never stopped loving you. And it turns out that she is reciting this monologue with Zaz. And he's like, you really should cry. It would be a lot better if you could manage to cry. So yeah, this whole thing, like the two of them are such schemers. I really love this. And there is a part of me that kind of like, I am really fascinated at the fact that Zaz is as in on this as he is, but he's also, because he says you have to make him love you again. And she says, what if I can't? And he says, well, what about your arsenal of weapons? And he literally sticks his hand up her skirt. And all of a sudden I realized, oh yeah, he's like into her and they're fucking, but he knows that she's fucking Raphael because she has to. I don't know how much they're actually fucking anymore because, like, you know, when people's relationships begin to get rocky, sometimes that falls aside. Sometimes it doesn't. It's very dependent on the type of relationship. But does Raphael ever like tell him, oh, last night me and Petra did something real wild, and he just has to like sit there and listen to it? Like, how long has he been in on this with her? Has it been the whole time? Or, you know, like, because 5 years is a long time to watch the woman that you're allegedly in love with, and I don't know if that's the word they use, but I'm going to say that it is, fuck another man and just like be cool with that on the sidelines and suggest it as a means of getting what she wants. This is just their very particular type of couple. That's all there is to that. And he's trying to be encouraging to her here. And we cut to, once again, Michael watching them and not knowing yet what their roles are in this drama that he's got going on with his own fiance. And he's got a partner here who, I think this is the first time we've heard from her, but she says something about how this is a waste of time because, like, you know, every time that this dude just is deciding to fuck Petra, this is not information for them. Cortez named Roman Zazo as a contact. If he's right, this is the first real lead we've had on Sin Rostro for years. We haven't heard from Sin Rostro in 4 years because he's dead. And then at the bottom of the screen, it says Sin Rostro equals the man without a face. Appreciate that, because I will be perfectly honest, I did not recognize Sin Nostro as words in Spanish. I just thought it was a name, like Sinbad. Sin was his first name. Nostro was his second name. It's without a face. I'm so sorry. I just, I have the heritage I have, but I am an ignorant, and that's all there is to it. He's mad about the fact that she's insisting this dude is dead. And she's just like, come on, man. You know that you don't do what this man did and then suddenly fucking vanish off the face of earth unless you're fucking dead. And he's like, well, or you're regrouping and planning something big. But he's got a look on his face to me that says he doesn't really believe that. I don't know. So here it goes. The phone rings and she says an ID on the woman, Petra Solano. Apparently, she's the wife of the guy who owns the hotel. And Michael, he has this like realization here, but it felt like he didn't get the full impact of it until he met Petra later. It's like he's putting it together in the hypothetical now. But when he comes face to face with her is when he's suddenly like, oh my God, I really am going to have to do something. And the narrator specifically says Michael's first thought is Jane. He has to tell Jane. So the narrator is letting us know his intentions initially are to be open and honest. But he can't help having this really deep reservation about what the consequences will be if she finds out. And he can't bring himself to do it. So we go to a scene of Raphael coming and talking to Jane and saying, I'm really sorry, I just don't know how to act around you. He asks if there's any way that he can come to the doctor's appointments, and she tells him that she has a sonogram scheduled and she didn't really want him to go, but he wants to. And eventually when they are there, it's fucking her and Michael and her mother and her grandmother and Raphael and Petra. Everybody's fucking here. We go back to Luisa and her like staring at this bottle of vodka, Rose coming in, the two of them being absolutely fucking stunning together. And I just can't handle it. Like this, I do not want to be fetishizing a lesbian relationship because I know gross, but honestly, like, look at them, like if this level of hotness were in a straight couple, I would also be fetishizing the fuck out of that because it's just really not right. Like two people this good looking together, it just feels kind of like that's not fair. One person should be significantly less attractive than the other. That's the way God intended. There's one person who gets lucky, and then there's a person who sees them for what's on the inside. How are they both this hot? Like, what the fuck? It's just truly rude. So anyway, they hook up. And Rose is just, we can't. And Luisa says, I know, and grabs her hand and puts it around her waist. And then they start making out and she starts undressing. And I was like, wow, they are just going to go for it. I mean, you've already had your license suspended. I guess, sure. And then we have the oh, but it's just Jane running to catch the bus. And she's calling Michael and explaining to him about how she's running late. And he is seeing these like pregnant women and really kind of freaking out at the changes that happen to their bodies, which this is the sort of thing that we have really, there's this sort of thing that happens. We have a thing where we shame women's bodies for what it what our bodies are naturally meant to do. And then it turns a corner, for me at least, where then it starts to be like, it's not gross, it's beautiful. It's nature, it's natural. And look, it can be both. It can be very gross and also magical and, life-giving. It can be natural and fucking disgusting. It's fine. I can't get over that we just pour blood out of our vaginas because we aren't pregnant. Really? That's the best they could do? That's the best they could come up with? This is how we're designed? Truly? And there's so many people like, don't shame women for having periods or people for having periods because it's natural. And we shouldn't shame. But I would like to be able to freely say having a period is gross and I hate it. And not have somebody be like, it's not gross because no. It is gross and whatever you were going to say. That's fine. So his reaction to these women who are pregnant here, as much as I want to be like, fucking dudes, I can't lie. When I see pregnant people, I have this reaction sometimes of just like, Christ, what is happening there? What's going on? Oh my God. And you're alive? How can you walk? What is this? Truly, pregnancy is a horror show to me. It is unnatural. Like, I know, and it is the opposite of unnatural, but like, so again, as much as I want to hold some things against Michael, I'm having a really hard time doing it. And he is going to be, he's going to be watching his fiance undergo this, and neither of them have even gotten to fuck yet. Truly, how unfair is that? She hasn't even gotten to take her vagina for a spin. And it's going to have to endure the worst trauma that it can. Childbirth. Like, genuinely, I would just go ahead and fuck now then. Truly, what have you got to lose? You know you're going to be giving birth. It's time. Your hymen's going bye-bye anyway, sweetie. It may be gone already at this point now that you've been inseminated. Like, who knows? Just go ahead and fuck while your tummy is still small enough that you can have the experience as if you weren't pregnant. And there's not to say there's anything wrong with pregnancy sex, but you know what I'm saying? Like, that's a different beast. And if you want to have sex as if you weren't pregnant, now is the time, because it's only going to get more and more of an obstacle as time goes on. I had a friend, and I wound up doing this big, like, fundraising thing for her. This poor woman didn't know she was pregnant, you guys. She was having all of these weird symptoms that don't come across as pregnancy symptoms necessarily. But if you are a woman in the world who goes to doctors ever, you know that one of the first things they check for is usually, are you pregnant? Before they'll fucking look at any other symptoms that are going on with you. And somehow that did not happen with her. And I am not kidding. She was 8 months and 1 week along and found out she was pregnant. And her boyfriend had just split up like 3 months earlier. And she was just not showing very much and was already sort of overweight. So it didn't really change her appearance all that much. She had 3 weeks to prepare mentally and physically for the fact that she was about to give birth. And it was, that's exact, Claire is in the chat saying, holy shit, that's a nightmare. That was what motivated me to do the fundraising for her, because I was like, that is an actual bad dream. Genuinely, that's a horror show. And the poor, like the fact that so many medical professionals had been seen and overlooked this was mind-blowing. And she was just out here still doing drugs and drinking and stuff like she normally did because she fucking didn't know. So there were all of these other potential complications that were like, it was just a real bad scene. And I kept thinking about that with the first episode of the show. At least, though, she had gotten to have sex. Like, Jane hasn't even gotten to do anything yet. It's unclear. I'm going to guess that Jane is pretty puritanical about what counts as sex. Because there are a lot of people out there who they'll do oral or even anal sometimes. But as long as there's no vaginal penetration, then they consider themselves still a virgin. I'm going to go ahead and guess that is not the case here. Probably she's like not even allowing any like below the belt anything to happen based on the way that she pulled away from him so quickly in the bedroom. So she truly hasn't gotten to do anything. I mean, I don't know how much if she has done any self-exploration, but based on the way the attitude and the Catholicism is ringing throughout that house, I would imagine that masturbation is sort of discouraged. So, Jane, girl, go get you some before it's too late and you've gotten like traumatized and don't even want to have sex because you've had this like crazy experience that nobody else is going to be able to relate to. Anyway, so we have this appointment and she tells him on the way, I need to explain to you the situation between me and Raphael and that 5 years ago we kissed. And Michael takes this kind of hard. And when he meets Raphael, he's very territorial about how he's engaged to her and they're very happy and he's in love with her and blah, blah, blah. He talks to her later about how uncomfortable it makes him that she's working there. And again, I can't help but understand. She puts her foot down and finally is like, no, I am going to take care of me and I want to keep my job. I need something that's familiar and stable. And I respect her for that. And I think that's the right call. But I really get where he's coming from. And when he watches her and Raphael walking, and she had just finished saying he has nothing to be jealous of, the body language in that scene is really tough to ignore. And the look on his face when he sees them, he is a very good actor. He truly looked like he had actually caught her cheating. And that might seem like an overreaction, but in the context of her being pregnant with this man's child, yeah. I mean, Rowan says, I understand Michael's reservations, but I still don't like him. And Claire says same. Yeah, it's a tough thing because everything about where he stands on stuff, I totally get. But let me jump ahead here. Raphael and Petra show up. And Michael decides that he is going to talk to Petra without Jane instead of telling Jane what's going on. And he tells Petra, stop the affair. And she's like, what? I don't know what you're even talking about. And he says, all right, well then let me be more clear. Stop sleeping with Roman Zazo. And she turns and stares at him. She doesn't even try to deny it, which I kind of appreciate. There's no, what? She says, how? Came by the hotel. Saw you together. Where? Doesn't matter. Do you even want this baby? End it, or I'll tell your husband. And trust me, Jane's not giving him that baby if he's alone. And she looks at him, and for a moment, she's like freaked out. And then a second later, she's realized she has the upper hand a little bit. Oh, you don't want it. Okay, I see. Fine. I'll end it. But maybe I'll need to ask you for a favor at some point. And he decides that's how he's going to play it. this is the thing for me that has pushed me off Team Michael at all. Again, I get wanting to not raise another man's child. I understand that this sucks. That's exactly it. Claire is in the chat saying, I didn't like how little he seemed to empathize with what Jane was going through. That's exactly it. He is so focused on how this isn't what he signed up for, and isn't thinking about how this is also not what Jane signed up for, my man. And what do you think she's going to do? If you don't want this, either dump her and admit this is a deal breaker for you, or be perfectly and totally honest with her about what's going on. You don't get to do a middle in between thing where you're kind of honest, but you also keep hugely important things from her in an effort to make things turn out the way you want them to turn out. It's just really like, it makes me uncomfortable that you're working at the hotel with this guy that you kissed one time 5 years ago and now you're carrying his child. Yeah, fair. It is very fair that you feel that way. She is pregnant and has health care, and you want her to leave that job and go somewhere else. I know that this isn't something TV really deals with, but I really wanted it to be mentioned that leaving a job that gives you health care when you are pregnant is a completely ridiculous ask. That's absurd to demand. And all of these things that could come up when you are in the middle of transitioning to another job, there is a huge possibility that her new insurance would refuse to cover a great number of things because they were either considered pre-existing conditions or because they're, there's all kinds of reasons. Insurance is, their whole job is to figure out ways to not give you help. So that, plus the fact her feeling so unstable at the moment, everything is like going crazy in her life. It just bothered me a lot that he is only thinking about what he wants here and is not considering. She has this like talk with, that's true. Rowan says, I feel like Raphael should already be paying for all the pregnancy related care. That's fair. Nevertheless though, but she talks to her mother like towards the end of the episode, finally coming to terms with the fact that like, I want this to not disrupt my life. And it's going to completely change everything. And she's talking about how I don't want to get attached to the baby, but I'm going to. How can I not? And then I'm going to have to give it away. And how am I going to do that? And truly, I loved this conversation. She really sounds panicked. She really does sound like she's finally saying out loud the million things that have been running through her mind every night for the past week. It's just like, it just felt like a really genuine conversation to me. And her mother saying, this is really not fair. And her being like, we can't go to It's Not Fair land. This is a conversation I have to have with myself a lot because some of us, I think this happens especially when you're neurodivergent, get very preoccupied with fair and unfair because we feel like there should be a very distinct boundary, and life just doesn't work that way. And we can know that intellectually, but it is a very difficult thing to accept, especially when it seems like a lot of the things that are unfair are within human control and could be fair if anybody gave a fuck. But all that said, it's not helpful to think about the fairness of things a lot of the time. It just doesn't actually help. So a big part of me was sort of just like, I appreciated her stopping her mom and being like, we're not even going down that path. I was like, yeah, that's probably smart. It would be very easy to get lost down that path, But her mother, as it turns out, had sung the milkshake song because Jane's hot date for her quinceañera is in the next room making out with some other girl, and she wanted to draw the attention away so that Jane wouldn't notice. Adorable. I am loving this. So she realizes that I was willing to protect Jane for that, and I am willing to do it now. And bless his heart, Rogelio showed up at the door because he's got so many phones that he never got her text canceling their plans. And she has him hidden in the room until she can like bring things up with Jane. And she realizes it's not the fucking time to do that. Jane's freaking out right now. And she tells him to never question her as a mother again. And she's not telling Jane right now. And he listens. He really is like, okay, all right. Yeah. I want Jane to have this sort of meltdown that she has with Michael. I want them to have a real heart to heart, for her to be totally vulnerable with him about everything, and him to open up to her and tell her the truth about Petra. And that, for me, would be an indicator that they are a good couple together. But if they aren't willing to be honest, it's already, we're in a bad place. We're not, this is just, it's a fundamental fact. If you have a relationship with someone and you feel like you need to keep a lot of things from them, or even any things, I don't think I have ever lied to Owen. Ever. If I have, I don't remember it. It's when things started to go wrong with me and Brendan, I never lied to him. And then stuff started to happen and I started lying. And once that begins, there begins to grow a wall between the two of you that hadn't been there, that becomes detectable. And they'll sense it's there, even if they don't know why it's there or what it is. And this is the start of it. She's going to start to be able to tell he's hiding something. And I think he really underestimates how perceptive she's going to be about it. Yeah, he's making a bad judgment call here. So anyway, this conversation with her mom, I just loved it. It was just so, and she also has a conversation with Raphael while she's getting the sonogram about how she's going to be brave and try and be a writer after all. And that, if it's something that I want, I may as well just actually go for it. Why not? So then we have a scene with Petra trying to break up with Zaz. And she tells him it's over. And he grabs her and manhandles her and has her by the throat and pushes her down onto the couch. And all of a sudden, she gets this expression on her face, like she's turned on, which, like, far be it from me. I can understand a man that you fuck a lot of the time getting rough with you and grabbing you by the throat in the right circumstances could be a turn on. But that is not what was happening here. I was just like, oh, all right, maybe that works for her. No. She's playing him, and she's being very, very good. So she says, good, you passed the test. I wanted to make sure you'd fight for me. And he says, damn right I'd fight for you, and then starts making out with her. Michael's watching all of this and is just like, are you kidding me? She's supposed to dump him. What the fuck? And she manages to get off of Zaz and says, I have to get ready. We'll sneak away later. So she goes out into the hallway, and I'm watching this thinking to myself, what is happening here? And then once she's out there, she's clearly shaken and is like, oh, that was a way for me to get out of that room alive. But now I have to deal with this fucking guy. So we have then the scene with her and Raphael. This is really well done on her part. She's talking to him about how sanctimonious he is. And she says, yeah, I did something terrible, but you know what? You did something terrible too. And what did I do? And she starts to walk away, and then he asks again, and she says, "You stopped loving me." I remember the day, actually. I'm sure it started happening earlier and I just registered it on this day, but you were halfway through your chemo and it seemed like you had a nice enough visit from your sister, but after she left, you came out and you were looking around, and when you looked at me, it was like everything had changed. I honestly hoped that this baby would be a real chance for us. Because you might have stopped loving me, but I never stopped loving you. And she actually cries because, as our narrator says, it's true. And it kind of changes the game for me a little bit that she actually loved him. I wasn't sure if that was true, but based on that, I'm assuming she really did. Also, that look, that moment where you realize somebody doesn't love you anymore. I believe that, you know. I don't feel like I ever really had that with Brendan specifically. I had a moment where I was like suddenly very sure that I had to dump him. It was just a moment of like, oh, we have to get divorced. There's absolutely no way we're making it past this. But I never had any moment of feeling like he doesn't love me. But I could see that being real, you know? And I wonder what the conversation was with his sister, because it feels like that's a big deal. It feels like that's linked. So she has had this moment with him, and it feels like she's convinced him. It's a good performance in that moment. So we have the two of them, like, seeming to have a nice moment, kissing, and we have in the locker room Jane and Michael kissing as he's reassuring himself he has nothing to be jealous of. This is the scene where we get Petra getting ready and her mother, and the reveal about the burns and the wheelchair. And then we've got the scene with Michael watching Jane and Raphael and feeling really jealous, which I cannot help but understand. She sort of like twists her ankle a little bit because she's wearing those like chunky shoes, and he catches her, and it's just a bit of a moment, you know. And then we have the reveal that Rose is actually Luisa's and Raphael's stepmother, which I will tell you what, that really came out of nowhere. We meet Raphael and Luisa's father. He is very protective of his daughter. He says something about how she made an unfortunate mistake, but she wasn't drinking. And that is what is important. Family is everything. And I cannot with the fact that Luisa is fucking her stepmother, who used to be like, is he aware that Luisa used to fuck Rose? I have to imagine he isn't, right? Oh, I don't even know. So then we have, I really thought at this point, okay, the episode's pretty much over. I have the remote in my hands, ready to turn the TV off, and I'm just like, well, let's just let this play out. We have the last two scenes. Jane's grandmother getting very excited over the fact that the president of Ecuadoras isn't dead. Running to her bedroom, opening the door, and finding her in bed with El Presidente, and the look he gives her when she says that is just too much. And I'm like, well, that's a great way to end the episode. I think that's it. I think we're done. So then we have Jane with her friend talking about ideas to potentially pitch to Raphael now that she's got some pull. And she had told, by the way, Raphael earlier, she was going to sue his sister, and he was like, you should. But they're talking about her being rich, and she's like, I'm not doing this to get rich, but being rich wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. So yeah, let's hear them. I'm all about embracing change. She's walking with her drinks. The lights go out. There's this sound. The lights come back up. And there's Zaz impaled on the horn of the Marlin. Is that the Marlin horn? Because it got replaced. The Merlin got replaced with the Marlin. Or is this like a different one? I don't even know what this is. But he's in an all-white outfit, so it makes this like particularly arresting. Plus he's elevated, so it looks like he got shoved off of the balcony or something. And the narrator says, on the bright side, Jean's quinceañera was no longer the worst party she'd ever been to. And I really want to point out, too, that, like, the crowd gathered around this, it's hard to tell, but I am pretty certain I see some blood spattered on Jane's shoulder. And I don't know, I have to imagine that some of those other people wearing white also got blood spatter on them. Can I just say, I am not mad. Like, this man was about to strangle Petra. I really think he was going to kill her. If he didn't kill her, I think it was going to be a struggle for him to not. I think he was going to try and blackmail her into continuing this, whether she liked it or not. I'm not mad he's dead. I am really not sure she did it, because I feel like it's very easy to assume she did it, and that's too easy. And I kind of wonder if Michael did it. There could be anybody, any number of people who did it, I suppose. This could have been done because he was part of the informant thing that they were investigating, you know, and maybe that was like, it was a danger to some organization that he still be alive. It might be completely unrelated, but I feel like my assumption was Petra, and I'm not sure that makes sense. Like, the lights all went out. Organizing that plus the murder, that's not a one-person job, I don't think. I don't know. But I'm very into it. What an ending. Really got me thinking. So, all right, I'm way over time. I have to wrap this up, but this has been super fun. Thank you again, Claire, for commissioning this episode. I'm really looking forward to the next one. Let me look and see when it is. The 29th. All right. Right before the new year. Oh, good. And I think another couple have been commissioned, but they're not quite on the schedule yet. So we'll do that soon. All right, everybody. Thank you again. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.